Hey, hey, hey. Time for an out of this world story from rSpace. 7 years ago, they said, I do. But little did OP know, reality had other plans. Cue the violins, right? Wrong. Today on rSpace, just when you thought they'd ride off into the sunset, here comes the virtual vixen. Received my cheating spouse's inheritance because of an infidelity clause. I, 40 female, got married to my husband, 38 male, 7 years ago, but we had been together for 18 years. At the time we were engaged, I was finishing up school and he didn't have a job at the time, so we couldn't afford to live on our own. At the time, his parents graciously took us in, and we were living in their basement. We had also received some money from them to help us with the wedding, and we were so grateful for it. Well, it turns out that money was actually from his own education fund that he was supposed to use for school but never did. I didn't find this out until much later. Anyways, because I was finishing up school, I didn't have time to plan our wedding like I wanted. I also just didn't have the mental capacity to be taking all of the decision making on. Since he didn't have a job, he took charge and planned the entire wedding. The wedding took place at a little camping site in a public park here in town. There's a little green space in the park that overlooks a river that runs through our city. It rained a little bit in the morning, but his parents had parked a trailer there that we could use to get ready, and so we just sort of stuck it out in there for a little bit and waited for the rain to subside. Before our guests came, we took photos. We only had our best pals as best man and maid of honor. My parents weren't there because I haven't spoken to them in years. His family, our close friends, and a few of my aunts and uncles and cousins came. It was a small, intimate ceremony, but it was lovely. But the wedding bliss didn't last for long. I had no idea that my husband had been unfaithful to me throughout our entire relationship. I recently found out that he had been having an affair with a woman he had met on Discord for a video game that he plays. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks, shattering the illusion of what I thought was our happy marriage. I couldn't believe that the man I had loved and trusted for so long was capable of such betrayal. When I got my job, I was the main breadwinner. For a while after the wedding, he didn't have a job. We lived with his parents for 4 years after we got married, so it was far from the lovey-dovey, passionate wedding bliss until we moved into a place of our own. Honestly, our bed got pretty dusty. We finally moved when my husband had gotten a job, but it was minimum wage and he'd be gone from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., and he often worked weekends overtime. I worked the 9 to 5, and when I came home, he'd have dinner ready for me when I got home, and the house would be clean and tidy. Honestly, I thought I had made it, and I felt bad that I was so exhausted by the end of the day. Well, you're probably wondering how I found out. He had a Saturday off, and because it was so unusual, I thought I'd surprise him with breakfast and fresh coffee. On those random Saturdays off, he'd still get up at his usual time and head to play video games because he said he played with his buddy, Pierre, who is in a time zone 2 hours ahead of him. So a little more context on Pierre. My husband would often stay up late to play video games with Pierre, and so even though he'd have to wake up and be at work at 6 a.m., he'd often stay up until 1 a.m. I didn't have a problem with this because we'd have our time to hang out after work until about 11 p.m., and then I'd read my book for half an hour to decompress, and he'd just go and play video games, and then I'd go to bed. Anyways, I'd go and make breakfast for him this one Saturday morning. He's already been up playing video games, and I walk in, he has his headphones on, and he's got Discord open, and he's messaging someone named Pink Bunny. Well, I'm standing behind him, holding his hot cup of coffee, and I'm reading these messages between Pink Bunny and my husband. And they are going far beyond PG. They are saying sexually explicit things, and they're saying how much they miss each other and love each other, and how they wish they were closer, and how she can't wait to see him again and have him hold her again. She wants him to do that thing again. Well, I plant that coffee cup down and he fumbles to close the Discord window. I just stood there and I felt numb as I processed the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. The sight of those messages burned into my mind, each word a dagger aimed at the heart of our marriage. I stood there, rooted to the spot, grappling with a surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Hurt, anger, disbelief, they all churned within me, a tempest raging beneath a facade of calm. I said, "How long?" He turned around, his expression shifting from surprise to guilt as he met my gaze. His attempts at explanations fell on deaf ears as I felt the weight of his infidelity crush whatever remained of our shattered trust. He kept saying the classic, "It's not what it looks like. It's just a friend." Then I say, "I saw it all. Just tell me how long." And then he admits she's an old friend from before we got married. The very foundation of our relationship trembled precariously, threatening to crumble into ruins. A hollow ache settled into my chest, mingling with a fierce sense of betrayal that seared through my being. So I left the room, and he follows me into the kitchen, and he falls on his knees, and he's bawling his eyes out and crying and saying he's sorry. I told him to get out because the apartment was technically mine. He didn't have the funds at the time to help with the mortgage. He didn't even have a job when we applied for the mortgage, so we had to ask his parents to co-sign. So, after that whole fiasco, he went to stay with his parents again in their basement. I couldn't stand to be near him any longer. I kept getting calls from his parents that I ignored for a few days. Then his mom came by and I couldn't ignore her anymore. I told her what he told me, and I told her that I was done with him and our whole relationship had been a lie. She tells me to try to make things work and that therapy might help. I say I don't know how I feel about that. I've pretty much made up my mind. Then, she said they've put a lot of money and invested a lot of time in our relationship, as in the relationship I've had with him. I say, what does that mean? She said they let us stay in their basement so that we could save up money for his apartment, and that they co-signed because they thought the apartment would stay in the family. I say, sorry, the house is actually in my name, and I'm the one that pays the mortgage, and I put the down payment on the apartment. I say, your son's been a leech, and not only is he a leech, but he's a lying, cheating scoundrel. She says that we shouldn't rule out therapy, and we should seek counseling, and that her son is sick with guilt, and he's sorry for what he's done. Then I say he's only sorry that he got caught. If I didn't catch him, we wouldn't be here right now, and he'd still be messaging Dumb Bunny. Well, she didn't really like hearing that, and she said if him and I can't come to a conclusion, aka that conclusion being therapy and staying married, then they'd have to consider selling this place and getting their money back that way. Then I told her over my dead body, and I said that she needs to get out of my apartment before I call the police. Then she says I can't call the police because it's her apartment too. And I'm like, you show me a document with your name on it, and then I'll call it your apartment. So then she storms out. Then I get a call from him and I don't answer. So then it's followed by a stream of text messages that are telling me that I can't speak to his mother that way, and she's only just looking out for us, and that I should reconsider what I'm doing to the family. What I'm doing? As far as I'm concerned, he's made it clear that we were never a family. He wanted to stick his wiener in every other hole but mine. It's a common saying that you don't really know someone until you separate. Well, the relationship that I had with him and his parents quickly deteriorated when I learned of his infidelities. Yep, that's right. It wasn't just one person, but also prostitutes, strippers, and whoever else he could find online. It slowly all came out in the weeks that followed. I guess his mom had asked to hear the whole story, and then she forced him to write an email to me telling me exactly what he told her. She told him it would help for therapy, but you can guarantee I didn't agree to going. I guess he had dated Pink Bunny, whose real name was Melissa, before we started dating. He said they had met online, and at the time she lived about 2 hours away, so she drove here and they hooked up in her hotel room. Then, he said she moved to out of state for school, but they stayed in touch and played online together. They talked almost every day, even when we were dating and into our engagement. They exchanged explicit photos and videos of each other, and they sexted constantly. He didn't see her again until a week before our wedding day. Apparently she flew in just so they could have one last go at things, but of course it wasn't the last. They met 5 times after we got married. After a few more threats from his parents, I have to admit I did get scared, so I went to the bank that we got the mortgage from and asked about refinancing the apartment so that I could get their names off of the title of the apartment. I had been working a solid job for quite some time, and my job was safe and secure, and I was making really good money. I felt I could handle the payments by myself, and I mean, I had been for some time because he wasn't really contributing much of anything anyways. I ended up being able to refinance by myself without letting his parents know, and I'm happy to say that yes, the house is now officially all mine. Their names aren't on anything, but they had no idea. So one day his parents come over. Somehow they got into the complex and they have papers in their hands, and they're standing at the front door, banging on the door, telling me to get out of the apartment because it's theirs and they're moving their son back in. Well, I'm inside laughing because they can't touch me or this place. Then I yell if they don't leave my property, I'll be calling the cops and getting their butts sent to jail. I said their broke butt son won't be able to bail them out. Then they said if I didn't let them in that they'd break the door down and drag my fat butt out. At this point I didn't even have to call the cops because someone else in the complex did for Malden Ruckus. The cops showed up no less than 5 minutes later and came to the door, and I said these people are trespassing and threatening to break into my apartment. And then I showed them the paperwork that I have that shows only my name on the title of the apartment and on the mortgage itself. Then his dad gets mad and says that he understands why his son cheated on a heifer, aka me. Then they continue to fight with the cops, and they say that they have paperwork that says the apartment is theirs. And they hold it up and the cops basically laugh in their face and tell them to leave. They say if they got another call that they show up to my place again, they're getting arrested. Best decision I ever made. Cheating is already intolerable in and of itself, let alone cheating with hookers. On top of everything else, he never got tested, jeopardizing my health for all those years and taking away 18 years of my life that he could never give back. I mean, I did get this apartment and it's completely mine now, but dang. He actually tried to hack my socials and my Google account and my bank information too. I had to change all of my information and get like two-factor identification for everything. He did manage to get one of my old emails hacked, but it was an old one from high school that I hardly used anymore and didn't have any of my updated personal information. He tried to pay for a new computer on a shared Visa before everything with his parents went down, and I had to dispute that and ended up winning. And then I closed that Visa. I ended up having to file a restraining order against him, and I told his parents that he'd better stick to it or else he'd find jail to be a pretty cold little home. Shortly after I left him and kicked him out, I wiped out all our joint accounts clean. I was sleeping with the enemy. In the end, he turned out to be a stranger after all, and the stranger who was meant to stay in my life as a stranger, and I'd like to keep it that way too. The divorce is finally finalized, and I'm free of him and his wretched parents. What a deadbeat. Thank goodness you got out of that one, OP. From the humble beginnings in the basement to the epic showdown over the apartment. And those in-laws? Talk about overstepping their bounds. But you showed them who's really running the scene with that slick refinancing maneuver. Now that the divorce papers are signed, sealed, and delivered, you're free to bask in the glory of your newfound independence. No more sleeping with the enemy or dodging unwanted visitors at your doorstep. It's time to embrace that single life like a badass woman you are. No drama, no cheating, just you and your well-deserved peace of mind. It sounds like you have your head on right. You're going to be just fine. Here's to turning the page on this chapter of your life and starting fresh. May your future be filled with nothing but happiness, success, and maybe a little less excitement. Update. I'm back. You're not going to believe this. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a letter in the mail from an attorney that I'd never heard before. I thought, great, now what? Well, I opened it up and saw that it was a letter about a trust fund that was set up years ago by my ex's grandparents, and it was intended for him or his spouse, aka me, under certain conditions. Well, it turns out his grandparents had foreseen the possibility of financial mismanagement by their grandson and created this as a safety net. In order for this trust fund to be released meant either the completion of a significant marriage milestone, like an anniversary, or, interestingly enough, a marital dissolution due to, you guessed it, infidelity. Boom. I guess the refinancing and the fact that I divorced my ex because he's a cheating SOB means that I am, in fact, the beneficiary of this trust fund. Imagine that. In navigating the legal process to claim this trust, I inevitably had to see my ex and my in-laws again, but they didn't understand exactly why I was there. My ex looked like absolute dog crap. He had lost weight, he looked like he hadn't slept, and his hair was thinning. Honestly, I felt pretty good about that. I had been taking good care of myself. I had been eating healthy and I was taking spin classes, and you could bounce a coin off my butt. I made sure I wore my very best so he knew exactly what he was missing. Once they found out I was getting a significant lump sum, my ex tried to weasel his way back into my life, offering apologies and insincere promises of change, but I wasn't going to fall for his games again. I stood my ground, refusing to let him back into my heart or my life. As the legal process seemed to drag on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction in seeing my ex struggle financially. It seemed that finally, some cosmic justice was being served. He had taken me for granted and cheated on me, and now he was being punished for his actions. The money from the trust fund arrived in a lump sum, and it was more than I had ever imagined. I took a deep breath and thought about my next steps. With this newfound wealth, I could finally start a new chapter in my life. Anyways, that's my update. Hopefully I don't come back for another one. Thank you all for your advice and comments and kind words and reality checks. I'm pretty proud to say that I'm feeling pretty good these days. Seeing your ex look like a shadow of his former self? Priceless. It's amazing what a little self-care and a whole lot of spin classes can do for the soul. While he's busy looking like a rejected extra from The Walking Dead, you're out there living your best life, flaunting your fabulousness like the boss you are. So here's to newfound financial freedom, killer curves, and leaving your cheating ex in the dust where he belongs. Cheers to moving on and never looking back. What do you think? Is it a red flag if your future husband wants to plan the wedding? Does that mean it's the beginning of the end? Thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon!